Hi there, this is my review of Warlord Games D-Day Firefight World War II starter set. As you can see, I have painted up and assembled all the miniatures for it. You get 2 ruined buildings, one Hanomag armoured car, a German armoured car, 1 squad of Germans and 2 squads of Americans. So 30 figures in all, plus an extra figure in the armoured car. You also get the rulebook for the game and some odd dice and some normal dice to play with. So overall it's a really cool thing to get. It's got everything in it you need. So to go over the actual figures and stuff, we will have to begin with the overall theme that I've given the army. You may notice the figures don't exactly match base wise, and this is primarily because I painted the Germans up as Chinese, and I painted the German Hanomag to go with my World War II desert stuff, and I painted the Americans to go with the World War II desert stuff as well. So overall it's not really D-Day. I'm not really doing it as D-Day, but you know, I'm a bit weird when it comes to things like that. However, despite all that, I will run over my review of the box, which is actually quite good. I think the stuff's quite nice. The buildings are extremely useful for any war game you're wanting to play. You always need ruined buildings. You get the dice and everything you need to play the game with, which has been very handy for us. And of course the figures aren't too bad either. Wasn't entirely impressed with the Germans, to be honest. They're a little bit chunkier than the Germans I'm used to working with, which is the early war Germans, which tend to be a little bit more spindly. And the Americans, I like the Americans, they're quite cool. The American squads, I gave 2 Thompsons to each squad and 1 bar. There is an option to have a bazooka, but I decided not to use the bazooka. I've just done them out as regular infantry squads. The Germans come with all the stuff you'd expect to get from the Germans, all the MP40, Ganschwehr 43, MG34s coming out of their ears. And so they're quite cool. You get everything you need in it and you can make up any squad you want. As it is, I actually use some Japanese equipment for them, so you know, I'm just been annoying again. So overall, the armoured car is probably the coolest thing you get in the box. The Hanomag comes with lots of little bits and bobs that you can use to modify the vehicle. You add storage on the side, you can see the storage on the side of the vehicle, and I really enjoyed doing it. So now I'm going to go between each different thing and give a review of each different thing. Starting with the most obvious choice, the Germans. I do have to admit I have Wargamers Tourette's. I keep inadvertently going mad and painting things as things they shouldn't be. These are late war Germans, but I've stuck some early war kit on them and painted them up as early war Chinese. Primarily because I need more Chinese for my Chinese army, and at this very moment in time a squad of Chinese comes in a lot more handy than a squad of late war Germans. I do apologise for that, but the figures are still the same figures, so I'm just going to run with it. Okay, so I gave the figures an overall dark green jacket, which is generally what you get for early Chinese nationalist troops. They have the standard German helmet, and all the other German kit does for Chinese anyway, so it doesn't really matter. The only particular modifications I've made is the Japanese Type 99 machine gun, the officer's sword, if you can see, the Dao sword, and a couple of Japanese rifles. However, the figures are the same figures, and most of the hands and stuff are from the same thing, so I'm gonna just blag it. The figures are quite good. I did mention that they're a little bit chunkier than I'm used to. They're not the same figures as I'm used to getting, which is the early war Germans, but they still are absolutely fine, and they paint up fine too. Not an overly large amount of detail on them, but not like the Americans. The Americans have got slightly better detail, but they do for what you want them for. So, moving on to my next thing. The Americans. Now, I love these guys. These are really good. They're quite well posed, and they actually look like they're doing some pretty good actions. They're doing a bit of running, a little bit of standing, some kneeling. Always useful to have a lot of different poses, which you often get. And I've managed to do a nice mixture of guys shooting and guys not shooting. I've given them all puttees. They do have the lace puttees. I'm using the version that was used in the desert and the Far East, which is a lighter colour than the one they were issued with in Northwest Europe. The puttees, by the way, are the little sock things around their boots. Did the trousers in light green. Normally the American infantry wore a mustard colour trouser in winter and a green or khaki trouser in summer. During D-Day they were actually in the very light green, almost khaki coloured trousers. These I've done in the slightly darker colour because I'm going to be using them for North Africa and for the Pacific to fight against Japanese regular army units to fight against Japanese. So that's why I've gone for that colour scheme. And I do apologise for anyone who was expecting to see Northwest Europe stuff. Although everybody does Northwest Europe, so I'm not bothered about being too much different. But these are all the figures you get in the box and all the kit and equipment you get with them, so they are still the same figures. I've done an officer with each unit. I've done 2 Thompsons with each unit and a nice big rifle as well, the name of which escapes me. A bar, sorry, yes. And everyone else is equipped with standard rifles. I've also done a mixture of kit. Some of the guys have got full kit. They've got their full kit on the back, as you can see, with the spade and everything. Some guys do not have kit. They've just got a water bottle. And the primary reason for that was to make them look a little bit rough and ready. As you would expect in combat, they're not all going to be fully tooled up. I'm sure on the morning of D-Day they all had all their kit exactly in place the moment they landed on the beach, but 5 minutes after, half their kit would have gone missing and they'd be using their mate's rifle. So pretty much generally, making troops look too tidy and clean isn't really a good thing, because in reality, if you've ever seen actual photos of soldiers or film footage of the actual war, you tend to find soldiers are wearing whatever they've managed to pick up. Particularly on the Eastern Front, which is my personal favourite thing. Most German troops can always be seen carrying Russian equipment, because generally the Mosin Nagant worked better than the Kar-98, and the PPSH was the overall best assault rifle of, submachine gun of the entire war. So it's a handy weapon to have, and if you can get hold of one, then get one. A downside to the American troops is they tended to use different types of ammunition for different weapons, which meant that if one guy ran out, you were in trouble. Unlike the Japanese, and to some extent the Russians, they tended to have machine guns that fired the same ammunition as the rifles, so you always had spare ammo. The Americans didn't have that. They tended to mix different types of ammunition rounds, and so they easily ran out of the bullets you need the most. Having said that, the Americans are a nice army to paint up, and not enough people do Americans. Everyone always does Eastern Front nowadays, and a lot of people do British, but Americans seem to have missed out in a lot of games. And I'm quite glad that this set has come out actually with the Americans as part of it, because it has made even me fork out and start playing with Americans. So it's something that is really cool, and I've got into it. And now we have the Hanomag, the SDKFZ 251-1, which you'll get in any rule book, although there was never actually a version, the 251-1, it was just the 251. Anyway, it's an Hanomag. It's the standard armoured car used by the Germans throughout the Second World War, and was pretty much the workhorse of the German army. It's a lovely vehicle to look at in real life, so having models of it is even more fun. And this one is actually painted up in desert colours. I realise again it is not in theme with the D-Day Firefight. I do apologise, but I shouldn't. So here we are. We have all the things you can expect from the kit. You have spare boxes of fuel, which, given that I'm painted up for the desert, will come in extremely handy. And I've painted up the German soldier in the 1942 Afrika Korps uniform. I've also added on his back some German kit from the late war set, from from these German guys actually. So he looks nice and in the part. I do really like the model. It was a lot of fun to put together, very easy to put together. It basically just fitted together really easily. Most kits tend to be rather complicated, but this was basically already assembled. So the wheels and everything are actually all in one piece. So all you do is just stick the whole lot on the side. There's no messing around with tracks, and there's no messing around with anything too complicated. So if you're not really into making kits, then this will actually do you, because it's not really much of a kit to make. So now we'll move on to the buildings. The first building I'm coming to is the ruined farmhouse, which is quite a nice little building. One downside to it was quite hard to put together. I found that it didn't really fit together entirely well, but that might have been more down to me not paying attention. But it did fit together in the end, and I've painted it up quite nicely. I wanted it to look really messy, so I put some rubble all around the edges, and then realised all the rubble was different colours, so then I decided to go over the edges with different colours as well. And maybe I should have just painted the rubble, I don't know. I've added a floor to the base to match the floor you get with the model, which makes it look a little bit more realistic. And it's a handy little building to have on the battlefield. It's not overly complicated to build, it's not overly complicated to look at, but it is a handy little building to play with. Now the next one is this one here, which is a very small little ruined house. As you can see, I've added floorboards like the last one, and I've added rubble all the way around the edges as well, which is quite good. Nice little doorway. I like the doorway. It's a nice model. Again, not entirely easy to figure out which end should fit to what, but I did figure it out in the end. But then again, that may be more my fault than the designers. So they're the buildings. The buildings are okay because they generally fit with any area you're going to fight in. You could use them on the eastern front, you could use them on the western front, you can use them for northern France, and you can use them in Italy. So they're pretty much open-ended buildings. You can use them for anything you want, and if you miss the roof out, you can even use them from the Middle East. So there you go. With all that blather over, we now come to the end of the video. I hope I've given you some insight into what I was thinking when I unpacked the box and when I painted it all up. I really do hope that if you're planning on starting World War II, then I've given you a few ideas. It is a very good way to start World War II in 28mm because you get everything you need to actually play the game, and then you can just expand using the stuff you've got in the box. If you already do World War II and just want to add a few units to your army, then it's also a perfectly good way of doing it because you get extra dice and a handy little pocket rule book that you can carry around with you, so you don't have to get the big rules out and beat your youngest son around the head with it when he keeps reckoning that you don't know what the rules mean. So having a little pocket book is handy because it's just about his size. Lastly, I should mention that the dice you get in the box come in quite handy because it saves you having to fork out on another set of dice when your child drops them down the back of the sofa or behind the fridge. I'm not arguing with you, no. And that's about it. I hope you liked the video, and if you did, please click like and leave any messages you feel you want to leave. Subscribe too, and this has been me. Thank you very much for listening and watching, and I hope I was useful.